What makes Dead Poets Society's opening scenes a true masterpiece is how subtle yet chock full of information they are. Unlike other movies, they require the audience to listen and look for clues that are hidden just beneath the lines. Unlike most other movies, Dead Poets Society does not have a narrator that tells you the main cast of characters. Instead, it builds an atmosphere that feels authentic. In the first few opening shots of the film, we see parents dropping their kids off at Walton Academy, one of the most prestigious high schools in the United States. After witnessing the assembly and seeing how formally these teens acted, we are led to believe that all these teens do is work. What Dead Poets Society does next is employ contrast to challenge our preconceived notions about the characters, a device that we will use often throughout the movie. Introduces our main cast of characters, minus Mr. Keating, acting goofy, hurling insults at each other, and even lighting up a cigarette in the middle of the dormitory. What all these scenes show is how even though these people might be dressed in fancy suits and come from fancy families, they are still teenagers. These scenes do a really good job of establishing these characters as three-sided human beings and not one-sided rich kid cliches. We also see them make fun of their school motto, which makes them more relatable, as what teenager has not made fun of his school before. Also learn a great deal about the characters by just a few first opening lines of dialogue. We learn that Neil Perry, by attending summer school on chemistry, is the overachiever. By the way Charlie Dalton commands Meeks and tells him to close the door, we know that he's somewhat cocky. We learn that Mr. Meeks, the one on the far right, is kind of nerdy as he aced all his tests last year. Todd Anderson, the new kid, is very shy because his personality is pretty much reduced to the shadow of his much more successful brother, that both his fellow students and teachers alike expect him to emulate that. The next shot, we see Neil Perry's father entering the dormitory. The cinematographer chose to alternate between Neil Perry's face and Mr. Perry's face as to reflect their back and forth dialogue, only to settle for a wide shot showing all the characters, which shows us their reactions to the dialogue, which only heightens the tension of the scene.
I've spoken to Mr. Nolan. I think that you're taking too many extracurricular activities this semester, and I've decided that you should drop the school annual.
But I'm the assistant editor this year.
Well, I'm sorry, Neil.
But, Father, I can't. It wouldn't be fair.
Fellas, would you excuse us for a moment? Don't you ever dispute me in public, you understand?
Father, I wasn't disputing
After you finish medical school and you're on your own, then you can do as you damn well please. But until then, you do as I tell you. Is that clear?
Yes, sir, I'm sorry.
You know how much this means to your mother, don't you?
Yes, sir. You know me, always taking on too much.
Well, let's move on. Now, listen, you need anything, you let us know, huh?
Yes, sir.
I let that scene play in its entirety to show how much of an effect it had. There was no sound except for the distant chatter of other dormitories, and the camera was positioned in such a way that Mr. Perry was on one side and Neil Perry was on the other side, making it seem like the viewer was an unwanted visitor looking upon family affairs. All this made Mr. Perry's scorn even more uncomfortable to watch. Another interesting thing to note is how Mr. Perry says, "I've decided to drop the annual, and you do as I tell you." What's more interesting to me, however, is how Neil Perry responded. In the opening dormitory scene, Neil Perry said that he went to summer school because his father thought he should get ahead. But now we clearly know that his father probably forced him to. And here, you can see Neil Perry justifying to himself why he should drop the annual by saying that he takes on too much. Then, when his friends ask him why his father does not allow him to do what he wants to do, he gets defensive and shouts at them.
Yeah, Neil. Tell him off. Couldn't get any worse.
Oh, that's rich. Like you guys tell your parents off? Mr. Future Lawyer and Mr. Future Banker.
Okay, so I don't like it any more than you do.
The cinematographer zooms in into Neil Perry's face to show his fear and shame, and as he leaves the classroom, his head is pointed towards the ground, which also reflects that. And as soon as he left the dormitory, you can see that Charlie Dalton also has a look of fear and empathy toward his classmate. We know that Neil Perry is destined to become a medical doctor, but now we know that Charlie Dolan and Knox Overstreet are also destined to become lawyers and bankers. We see that the parents drop their children at this school not so that they can explore their creativity, but that they can do a path that has already been charted for them since they were born. Because Neil Perry tries to brush off his passion as some afterthought and tries to justify his father's tyrannical rule over his career choice, we see that this has disastrous and quite tragic consequences in the future. This movie forces us to pause and think, is pursuing our dreams despite the social consequences worth it? Should we aspire to the romantic ideals of carpe diem and do it? Or should we play it safe and go through the path that has already been charted? Although it won't be exciting, it will be secure. This is the question that every single character has to answer by the end of this film. But even without the context of Neil's suicide, the opening scenes still have a lot of information just beneath them. As I alluded to in the beginning of the video, they use contrast, purposely showing the children in the dormitory and the children before in the auditorium. You can see the contrast between the formality of the auditorium and the teenage rebellion of the dormitory. Teenagers are essentially living double lives, and Dead Poet Society focuses on this in order to show us that things might not be what they seem to be. This is very important because it shows one of the underlying themes of the entire movie. Teenagers want to be free and want to be able to pursue whatever dreams that they have inside them. But due to the social atmosphere and the political authority in their school, they are prevented from doing so. That is why when Mr. Keating introduces the romantic ideals of carpe diem and striving for your dreams, all the teenagers suddenly get inspired to do what they have always wanted to do.
Gotta do more, gotta be more!
This, precisely, just like how I stated in the beginning of this video, is what makes Dead Poet Society narrative style a true masterpiece. Not only do they show you the official narrative of the teachers, school administrators, and parents who want you to believe that these students are destined to become great things that either their brothers or their parents have decided for them, versus what the teenagers actually want to do, even though that might dip below their family name of high prestige. And this tension is what sets the groundwork for the plot that will unravel in the next few minutes of the film. Viewing the opening scenes in hindsight, it has become clear how the opening scenes set the foundation for the major plot point throughout the film. But the film also passes the torch on to you. Are you happy with what you're doing? Are you doing it because your parents forced to, or because it's secure? Are you doing it because you actually like it?
Okay, so I don't like it any more than you do.